The tier structure of Microsoft's Xbox Game Pass membership has never been more complex or convoluted. We take a look at some popular misconceptions about the service and calculate which tier does, in fact, offer the best value for money. First, let's have a look at the basics. The Game Pass tiers explained. For anyone unfamiliar, there are now 4 plus 1 Game Pass tiers, which is arguably 3 too many. But let's have a look. First, Ultimate. This comes with everything. All first party releases, and some third party, on day 1, cloud gaming, and EA Play. Standard. This is a new one. It comes with a curated selection of games, excluding day 1 releases, with the possible exception of very specific cases, no cloud play, and no EA Play. Core. This is the bare bones tier. It comes with a vastly reduced selection of games, no day 1 releases, no cloud play, and no EA Play. PC. This includes selected day 1 releases for PC, including all first party releases, all PC games that are also in Ultimate, EA Play, and no cloud play. Console. This is the old tier, which is still available if you're already subscribed. It comes with selected day 1 releases for console, including all first party, all console games that are also in Ultimate, but no EA Play, no cloud play, and no multiplayer. And a note on that, all tiers except console do now include online multiplayer. In this table you can see an overview of the Game Pass tiers. On the left we have each tier, then the price and the number of games included, and then some tick boxes for the features that are available. When comparing in this table you can see there's a few oddities. PC clearly offers the best feature set for the money, and a few strange things even console didn't. EA Play being the main one. Obviously PC gamers don't have to pay for multiplayer, so that makes it pretty feature complete, just lacking cloud play. Now let's have a look at the games. We're going to focus on the games included in Ultimate or Console, but not in Standard, as that's the key change with the new system. Console has effectively been replaced by Standard, but instead of day 1 games you now get online multiplayer included. So just what's involved with this sacrifice? For the purpose of this analysis, we're not including EA Play titles, as they are not, or were not, included with Game Pass for console. So there's around 42 games that have been lost between console and standard. The games missing have an average age of around 9 months. They're overwhelmingly games that released day 1 on Game Pass, whether first party or third party. They have an average Metascore of 79.5, which is slightly higher than the Game Pass Ultimate average. They have an average Xbox review score, via the Microsoft Store, of 3.6, which is actually slightly lower than average. 6 titles missing are from Xbox first party, and we're not including Overwatch 2 in this, as it's free. The next publisher in terms of the number of games missing is Annapurna, with Neon White, Flock, and Open Roads all originally absent. The latter 2 were day 1 on Game Pass. Open Roads has also since been re-added. In this table you can see selected games missing between Game Pass Console and Standard. We've ordered them by Metacritic score. There's a few missing from this list, but these are really the heavy hitters that aren't in the tier. It's clear from the games excluded that Microsoft have largely stuck to their guns in terms of removing day 1 games from that tier. It wasn't immediately clear that first and third party day 1 games would skip Standard, but that does seem to be mostly the case. You do, however, still get some newer releases on there, such as the Doom and Doom 2 release from August. Arguably that's a special case with it being a retro game, but we have also seen Atlas Fallen, Reign of Sand, Expeditions, a Mud Runner game, Britato and Power World included. The likes of Britato and Power World being included is maybe a bit surprising given these are viral hits that still see strong player engagement. Now we've already had a couple of batches of new games into the standard tier. As of early October 2024 we saw MLB The Show 24 and Open Roads come into the tier. MLB released in March 2024, so that's 6-month turnaround for that to come into standard, while Open Roads released in February. We probably can't read too much into things at this stage, as it's still so early in the tier's lifespan, but we perhaps can suggest that for third-party games, a 6-month delay before they show up in standard may be likely. First party certainly seems longer, with Starfield and Forza Motorsport both still absent and now over a year old. Considering Forza's tame performance in the most played charts, and lukewarm critical reception, it's a surprise that one is yet to move over, and probably tells us something about the first party strategy for this tier. Now, the important one, let's have a look at value for money. In working out which Game Pass tier offers the best value for money, we're looking at 3 metrics. Age. We know the standard tier should generally have older games, but how does this compare across the board? Price. Are the games generally full price releases or more budget priced indies? And quality. Using Metacritic score and the Microsoft Store user ratings to get an average. We'll then take the monthly fee for each tier and work out what's best. Of course, it primarily comes down to what you want from Game Pass, but it's nonetheless interesting to look at in detail as the narrative is very much that gamers are being exploited by Microsoft here. This table shows the key Game Pass metrics, with the tiers again down the left hand side and the number of games, but we now have the total game value, the average value per game, the average age per game, the average user rating per game, and the average Metascore. And there's a few clear takeaways from the analysis. PC, again, appears the best tier at first glance. It has the highest value games on average, plus more recent games for the lowest price, except for Core, and it has EA Play. While Core has a very limited selection, they are actually the best games ranked by Metascore and user reviews, though they're also the oldest, not only lacking day one titles like the standard tier, but also just missing slightly newer games that do find their way into standard. Despite this, Core isn't simply packed with Xbox 360 games. In fact, it has very few. They do appear to be a quite carefully curated selection of primarily Xbox One era games. Ultimate, of course, contains console and PC games, which gives it a bit of a deceptive value proposition. The 538 games and $12,000 value sound impressive, but if you're a console-only gamer that wants day one games, you're actually only getting an extra 40 compared to standard for your money. The elephant in the room in terms of value is, of course, the addition of online multiplayer as part of the switch from console to standard, in exchange for day one games. PC doesn't have this problem with multiplayer always free, which is how it's able to be the cheapest tier other than Core. Arguably, in order to calculate the true value, we need to put a price on online multiplayer before calculating the price per game. Here we have the price per game table, showing again the tiers down the left, the total number of games, the price of the tier, and then we've calculated the cost per game. If you ignore the fact that multiplayer is bundled in with the other tiers, PC Game Pass is by far the best value in terms of the new structure. If you happen to still be subbed into the console tier, then it's as good as identical to PC in terms of value. PC is $0.026 and console is $0.027 per game. A common argument has been that Microsoft favours PC gamers with their Game Pass pricing structure, but if you look at the console tier pricing, it seems more like they just have a price they put on console multiplayer gaming. The fact that PC and console tiers have been so similar in terms of value indicates there isn't an inherent bias towards PC going on. At the other end of the spectrum, Core is by far the worst value when the inclusion of multiplayer is not factored in. You're paying an incredible 453% more per game compared to the standard tier. Meanwhile, when looking at standard versus console, which is in our interest considering the recent changes, standard is 57% more expensive per game than console, but again, crucially, it has multiplayer. With that in mind, and to make things fair, we've added these extra columns where we make an assumption that online multiplayer is worth $9.99 per month. This is the price that Xbox Live Gold was, and of course is the price of Game Pass Core now. Once this is factored into the value proposition, things change considerably. All of a sudden, PC and console are the worst value per game, with Ultimate dropping down below 2 cents, and standard actually becoming the best value, except Core, at 0.014 per game. When considered like this, the console tier is 92% more expensive per game than standard. However, it's still only 3 cents per game. These are very fine margins. Core is actually the best value when considered in these terms, as you're kind of getting 44 games for free with your online multiplayer. To sum up, there's been a lot of vitriol around the recent changes to Game Pass, particularly some angst at Microsoft pushing gamers into the Ultimate tier for day one games and forcing multiplayer onto people who may not want it. We don't have performance data for these tiers, which means we can't make any concrete statements about whether the tier changes were due to underperformance by the console tier, or because Microsoft wanted to force people into Ultimate for access to Black Ops 6. Certainly the latter seems most likely. While we can be angry about that and indeed frustrated about the price hike, as well as being continually confused by the complexity of the tier system, there don't seem to be grounds to be annoyed any one tier is particularly better value than another. The Game Pass tiers are surprisingly close in terms of value when looking at price per game, as well as quality and recency. It really is a case of having to make the right choice for yourself based on what you can afford and the features you need, particularly with regards to cloud play. Parity of features between PC and console players is a warranted concern, with PC having day one games and EA Play, which Standard does not. But we have to view this as a trade-off required for multiplayer being bundled in. We also mustn't forget that all existing console tier players, with day one games but not EA Play, will continue to receive everything they're used to until they cancel their subscriptions, a move Microsoft didn't necessarily have to make. If that changes, then we can start asking questions. The arrival of Black Ops 6 is a watershed moment for Game Pass. If the numbers don't increase significantly enough as a result, we should expect to see further changes before long. We'll be tracking the metrics outlined in this article to ensure the service doesn't get watered down, or to see how much it improves going forward. Let's hope.